Hey patrons, thank you so much for all the continued support. It means a lot to me. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished up listening to Carl's Doomsday Scenario. This is book 3 of Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinniman, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was just right now. So this book is an easy 5 out of 5 for me, and in my opinion, just thinking about it, right off the cusp, this is the best Dungeon Crawler book out of the 3 that I've read so far, which is a series that I really am in love with. Now, I was worried going into this book and the series because I gave the first book a 5 out of 5. And in part, the reason I gave it was I found the premise to be so dang interesting and fun. The whole book's not fun. I'll talk about that later. But it can be very serious at times. I don't mean like I didn't like it. But the premise hooked me. Now, by the second one, I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. And I worried that, was it just the interesting premise that got me? And now I'm just going to be giving, 4s at most for the rest of these books. And that the series is just going to regress from what my personal tastes are. And that's just not the case. This book, in every way, I felt like was better than, especially the second book. But I think in every way, it pretty much improved upon the first one as well. Not so much the writing quality. I find Matt Dinniman to be an equally good writer from all 3 of these books. I haven't seen some big progression out of him, but I just love so much about where the plot is taking me and the new characters that we're getting. Just everything kind of just got elevated a little bit. Now, I am also particularly obsessed with the audiobook format of these books. And while I'm sure that these books would be very good if you read them physically or like an ebook, but the narration by Jeff Hayes with Sound Booth Theater is just... it's about as good as it gets. Gun to my head, I think the only audiobook narrator that I like more than Jeff Hayes in what he's done with this series is Stephen Pacey with The First Law. I still think of him as, the top of the top of the top, but right behind him is Jeff Hayes with this series. And, it's hard for me, I'm not some professional reviewer. I do this all as a hobby. I am just a guy who likes books that decided to record myself one day. And so it's hard for me sometimes to get out what I like about certain things. And I don't often talk about what I like about different audiobook narrators. It's hard for me to explain that because I haven't done a lot of experience with it. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is the range of the different voices that are used in this book. I mean, Jeff Hayes goes from the deepest, manliest, harshest voice that you could think of for somebody like Carl, like a man's man. And then he can flip instantly over to like a feminine sounding woman that is legitimately good. I find with a lot of audiobook narrators, especially ones that are just so-so, when women that try to do men's voices and men that try to do women's voices doesn't quite work. And it makes sense. I mean, if I try to do a woman's voice, I'm going to sound like, something from a Monty Python sketch. But Jeff just nails it. And I don't know how he does it, but he has so many different characters in this book, and they all have this intensely unique voice. And he's not relying on things that we would think of as like ethnic voices. He's not using an accent from England to make a specific voice, or trying to do an Indian accent or a Chinese accent. He's just using his range of voices to give us a very unique blend of all these characters, and that he's looking into finding out what that character should sound like. I get the feeling like he reads these books before he does the audiobook narration, which I don't think not everybody does. I'll say that. Maybe they claim they do, but clearly not everybody does. But it just fits. And so, yeah, in love with the audiobooks. I'll stop talking about them there. But if you're if you're like me and you're constantly on the hunt for a really good audiobook series, and listen to the rest of this review if you haven't ever heard of Dungeon Crawler Carl before, but see if it's kind of for you in the first place. But if it is, you got to try the audiobooks. So, speaking of people that don't really know a lot about Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I get a lot of people that watch my reviews that have not read the previous books in any of the series that I do, but I'll give you a really quick kind of background on what Dungeon Crawler Carl is. So imagine modern day Earth, and a character wakes up one day. He's outside with his cat. trying to get his cat out of a tree, and every building suddenly just crushes down like a sardine can into Earth, disappears. And a loud voice comes on that explains that Earth has been taken over, in fact, always was. Aliens kind of ran Earth and kind of ran humans as an experiment, as they do with lots of planets, to run a galactic-wide game show whereby the characters, or everybody that survived this, everybody that was outdoors at the time, will go to this dungeon under the Earth and battle through level after level after level to try to get to the bottom to win against increasingly difficult bad guys and bosses using magical items and leveling up like a video game and trying to be the sole victor of this game while it's televised. It's this amazing mix of fun, lighthearted, funny, but somehow balanced with like a serious and horror aspects and a very grim nature to it. Just by the nature of the plot. Everybody that you know is pretty much dead and dying all around you, and you're having to kill other people. Not just the monsters, but you'll find yourself sometimes pitted against a real human being that you don't want to kill, but you feel like you have to. It's a very dark concept, but it's overlaid with this really awesome humor. Not just based on what's happening, but there's these... oftentimes there's this narration going on by people that are kind of narrating these aliens that are narrating what's going on. It's really funny. The way that, and a new item is received, a description that is always rather comical will come over what that item is. It's great stuff. But yeah, love the blend of these two very different concepts for a book. So let's talk a little bit about this book in particular. The plot. Now, before I go into the plot itself, and I'll just give very broad strokes here so I don't spoil anything, but the plot fixed 2 of my 3 problems that I had with the second book and why I gave the second book a lower score than the first. Specifically, in the second book, it turned into a book essentially about side quests. Obviously the goal was to proceed down in the dungeon. Every character has to have to spend an equal amount of time on each level, and towards the end, the stairways open up and they can go down to the next. And so your whole goal is to get to these stairways. But it was about these side quests and trying to do things that didn't necessarily have to do with that, just so the characters could get experience. It felt like we were kind of detracting from the core part of this plot. It felt weird. That didn't happen here. And also... In the first book too, but really in the second, we were getting spoon-fed a lot of information, too much information, by a character who knew more than we did. And I don't want to ruin anything, but there's these game guides that can kind of explain what's going on to the characters, and it got ramped up to 11 in the second book. And part of what I loved about the first book, and now in this one, is that you, the reader, are discovering what's going on along with these characters who don't know what's going on. It just puts this sense of mystery out there, and let's try to figure out what's going on together, instead of just being explained it. I love the show, don't tell aspect to storytelling. I think most people do. I really do. And the third book harkened back to the first one. And yeah, so I love that about it. The plot itself, just very broadly, every floor has a different theme to it. The theme on this one is trains. So there's this thing called the Iron Tangle. Essentially, there are a god-awful amount of train lines that are all intermingled on top of each other, next to each other. They're everywhere. And the characters are found that they have to get to an exit that is behind them, and they have no way to get there. So they're trying to figure out, do you work your way all through it? Do you end up teleporting? Is there a way to go backwards? Are there train lines that go backwards? How do we get to this progress? And I love the tight corridors of this, monsters coming on and off, characters trying to just navigate this whole process. It was confusing in a good way. I kind of ended up giving up on trying to understand every single mechanic to the way these lines worked. And I think the book is meant for that. I don't think you have to be meticulous on figuring out all the little rules here. You just go along with it. It's fun. I enjoyed the setting. I enjoyed the plot. It was good stuff. Now the world building. It fixed my last issue I had with the second book. And that was that the second book got out of the dungeon atmosphere and got into this open world medieval type setting. It did have a ceiling, the ceilings were painted to look like sky, But that's just like a one sentence written in there. For all intents and purposes, we were, teleported into this medieval setting. And I loved the whole dungeon, you don't know what's around the next corner aspect to that first book. And that's what we got in this third one. And yeah, I think the plot really goes along with the world building here because it's all about these trains, these tight corridors, solving the mystery. It's good stuff. The fantasy elements are, it's part of what makes this book so special in the series. And it feels like you're reading a video game. Now, I love video games. If you hate video games, you're going to hate this book. If you love them, there's a good chance you're going to like it. Maybe if I exclusively read these kind of books, I'd become a little dull. I don't read a ton of books like this. And it seems lazy on first glance to have characters literally be leveling up. I improved this, my barehanded attack. I got the, special vest with +4 health, stuff like that. And it works. It works so well because of the setting and the fact that we're in this game show and the fact that the characters feel odd about this as well. These are human beings stuck in this world that are just trying to go along with what's going along. I love the different, magical beasts that are involved here. They're very inventive. It's not just like orcs and goblins. Dinniman really stretches his imagination to fill out the characters in these books. The settings, the magical items, the magic abilities the characters have. And trying to balance it all out without making characters get too overpowered and remembering what powers they've got before so everything kind of has consistency to it. As the reader, you're not sitting there going, well, why didn't they use this special power they had in the second book? It feels like it could overpower the situation. Everything kind of flows together. It's very well planned out. I don't know how much Dinniman plans this whole thing out, whether he's got it all, all the steps kind of orchestrated out beforehand, kind of like Sanderson does. It feels like he kind of does because everything really feels tight. It makes sense. Love the characters here. We keep getting more characters to the mix. And in the early parts of this book, we're told about other characters because there's this top 10 list of the most infamous crawlers, and we're getting to meet them as we go along. It's fun. They're all unique. I love the way that they interact with each other. I say this with love, but this book is not, you're not going to read this book for perfect writing. It's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of this dirty, kind of gritty type of writing. That's not the perfect prose. The characters aren't perfectly built out. Nothing's perfect. But ultimately what I come down to is everything is fun. Everything is made for maximum enjoyability. Now, as a reader, I mistakenly have this impression that everybody kind of likes books the way I do. And that people go to read books so that they can have a good time, so they can have fun. Apparently that's not the case. And I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but I've done reviews. I don't want to talk about which ones so we go into the weeds, but I've done reviews where I've made this claim and I've kind of bashed on a book because it's not fun. And people go, that's not the point of every book. That's not the point of a lot of books, to have fun. The point is a character study. The point is to read beautiful prose. The point is to understand these themes. And that's not at all what you get here. What you get here is literally trying to make the most addicting, fun book as possible. I love that kind of thing. It works so well here. It works so well here. And I just find myself, it feels like an addiction, in a good way. Not one that's bad for you, but it feels like I just can't get enough of this. And that's what I want out of my books. I want to be flying through them so fast that I'm worried that I'm going to get through the content so quickly. I hate reading books sometimes where I feel like a grind to pick it up. I regret it. I'm like, ugh, I got to pick this up again, try to grind through it. No, this one's you're going to fly through this. So I think I've sung my praises enough on this book. The last thing I will go over is, who is this book in this series for? It's for video game nerds, or people that are interested in that kind of thing. It's for people that like a progression style to their fantasy stories, where the characters get more powerful as you go along. It's for people that like RPGs, tabletop RPGs, games like World of Warcraft, things that are intended to hook you in, and constantly make you feel like there's, if just let me just read a little bit more to see what this character gets. Before you know it, it's 3 a.m. And you're going to be ruining yourself for work in the morning. That's what this is for. And it works to perfection. So I'm going to end it there. Thanks so much for watching this review. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons. Anna G, CJ, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝐸𝑭rthodoxia, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry B, Joe, Kat Mick, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, 𝗏𝐶𝐬, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.